The ideal of American politics is one of engagement and interaction, one where the electorate discusses beliefs and help to educate one another. There can be serious debate as to whether the U.S. ever truly embodied this ideal. There can be little doubt, however, that the current state of American politics has not brought us closer to achieving it.
Wrong.
You're a liar.
What was meant to be a process filled with public discussion has instead become a ratings factory for major media conglomerations that fill the eyes and ears of the public with read-only media and shouting matches that drown out any intelligent thought in the viewer.
That was it.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
The biggest problem with this kind of media is that it leads to programming that shuts down the ability for citizens to have a real debate. Democracy is fundamentally a read-write process. That is, democracy needs concerted feedback from the public. 20 years ago, this reliance on read-only mass media might have seemed normal. There were no better options for communicating information about politics to the public, except for the traditional channels of mass media. There are now other options. Despite that much cultural influence appears to be moving back towards a read-write format, with advancements such as Web 2.0, the 20th century's read-only media formats seem to be maintaining a hold over the political process, even as they appear to degrade in quality.
Let's go to Terrace and look for the bit. They have the pit.
Why might so many people continue to participate in read-only political education? Clearly people find this manner of reporting attractive. After all, CNN has just had its most-watched first quarter since 2003. There is a question of agency on the part of the viewer. People are choosing to partake in a read-only media form. They're not being forced. Read-only media is intrinsically authoritarian. It tells the reader what to think. It does not invite questioning. It may be entirely reasonable, then, to assume that the hold mass media still holds over people could be riding the wake of the authoritarian movement underlying much of U.S. politics as of late. The comfort of media's old guard may well be a welcome conformity for many in a time of great change in society's media habits. Research has shown that authoritarian tendencies in people can be triggered by sudden cultural changes, and holding tight to familiar media forms in reaction to a transition to more interactive outlets may be natural. Television is certainly familiar. Neil Postman goes as far as to call it a myth by Barth standards, saying that television is a way of understanding the world that is not seen as problematic, that we are not fully conscious of. Television seems, in a word, natural. It is true that people have been getting their news from read-only sources for generations, but it is only recently that those sources have begun to so severely degrade. And this degradation has led to a public that is unable to engage in the read-write activities that read-only sources once encouraged, such as public debate, with many sources leaving the viewer unprepared to seriously defend their position. But how is read-write media supposed to help with these issues exactly? It does provide direct feedback and provide the opportunity for the reader to draw their own conclusions. While it is true that read-write media can be contaminated with falsehoods, it could also self-repair through users like Wikipedia. Perhaps a less extreme version of a read-write news source are the many examples housed on theinteractivenews.com. Let's take a closer look at a couple of examples. One an op-ed, and the other more traditional sports reporting, done in a new way. This opinion piece from the New York Times makes use of an interactive video game form to explain the difficulties some people face when trying to vote. First, let's see what it's like to vote as a white programmer in California. What about a Latina nurse in Texas? This is already not going as smoothly. That the game takes the form of Oregon Trail is important, because that game is a cultural touchstone for frustration. This choice helps to convey that feeling of frustration that many people feel while voting. More generally, the video game aesthetic may be useful because video games are often coded as white, and since a Latina nurse from Texas does know what she has to put up with when she votes, the white programmer from California is probably the target audience. Now let's look at the sports reporting on the Olympics. The interactive display in the Olympic story makes it especially easy for the reader to understand the numbers involved and see new patterns on their own. As the reader finds patterns, they may be encouraged to more closely engage with the story's content, because instead of just telling the reader how many medals the U.S. has in each section, the story asks the reader to look and provides them with the tools to do so. It may come as a surprise that both these examples come from the New York Times and the Washington Post, two traditional news sources, but perhaps this represents a shift to interactivity in reader participation, even among mass media sources who might finally and slowly be moving away from read-only media forms.